Okay, so you want to own a golf course. Rolling green fairways at sunrise, a flag snapping over the 18th hole, a clubhouse veranda where you sip your coffee and watch foursomes tee off into the mist. That's the picture in your head. Your own slice of paradise, and people pay you for the privilege of walking through it. Here's the problem. That packed tee sheet you're imagining, the one with every slot booked from 6 in the morning to closing, is the single most misleading image in this entire business. Because a golf course is not really a golf business. It is a turf and real estate operation that happens to have flags stuck in it. And the moment you understand that distinction, everything about how a golf course actually makes money and how quietly loses money starts to make sense. Let's start with what you're actually buying into, because golf course is one of those phrases that covers several completely different businesses wearing the same green jacket. At the bottom end, you have municipal and public daily fee courses, the kind run by a city or a private operator charging $30 to $70 a round, open to anyone with a credit card. Volume is the entire game here. Above that sits the semi-private course, a hybrid model that sells memberships to a core group while still opening tee times to the public to fill gaps in the schedule. Above that, the private country club, the one with a waiting list, an initiation fee, and a board of members who vote on who gets in. These clubs often don't even try to make money on the golf itself. Then there are resort courses attached to a hotel where the round is really just one more amenity sold alongside the room rate. And finally, the golf real estate community, where the course is barely a business at all, exists to make the surrounding lots worth more per acre. Each of these is a different bet on the same underlying question. Do you make your money from a large number of golfers paying a little or a small number of members and homeowners paying a lot? That decision shapes every other number that follows. Now here's where the naive mental model breaks down fast. You think the expensive part is the grass. It isn't. The expensive part is the land itself, and the astonishing amount of irrigation infrastructure required to keep that land green for 18 holes. A regulation 18-hole course needs somewhere between 150 and 200 acres, depending on layout and terrain. In a rural market, raw land like that might run $5,000 to $15,000 an acre. In a desirable suburban corridor, the same acreage can run well past $50,000 an acre before a single shovel goes in the ground. Course design and construction, shaping fairways, building greens to USGA specification, installing drainage typically costs between $4 and $8 million for a mid-tier course and can exceed $15 million for a championship caliber layout. Then comes irrigation, and this is the line item that blindsides almost every first-time owner. A modern, computer-controlled irrigation system covering the entire course, sprinkler heads, underground piping, pump stations, weather sensors, runs between $1.5 and $3 million to install. And that system has to move an enormous volume of water. A typical 18-hole course in a warm climate uses somewhere between 90,000 and 120,000 gallons of water a day during peak season, which adds up to tens of millions of gallons a year. In water-stressed regions like the American Southwest, water rights alone can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. And in drought years, some municipalities have imposed mandatory cutbacks that directly limit how green your product is allowed to be. Add the clubhouse, typically running somewhere between $2 and $8 million depending on whether it includes a restaurant, banquet space, and pro shop, and a cart fleet of 70 to 90 electric carts at $4,000 to $6,000 each. If purchased outright, and a new 18-hole facility can require anywhere from $10 million to over $30 million before a single green fee is collected. So far so predictable. Now let's talk about what happens after the doors open, because the maintenance bill on a golf course never stops, regardless of how many rounds get played. Turf agronomy is a genuine science, not a hobby. Greens require a completely different grass species and maintenance regime than fairways, which are different again from rough. Fungicide and pesticide. Programs to protect against disease can cost $50,000 to over $200,000 a year on a single course, and skipping a treatment cycle to save money can kill an entire green in a matter of days. A mistake that can take a full growing season to repair. Mowing alone requires a fleet of specialized equipment: greens mowers, fairway mowers, rough mowers, each costing between $15,000 and $60,000, and a course typically needs multiples of each because greens get cut daily, sometimes twice a day, during tournament weeks. A full equipment fleet for an 18-hole course commonly runs between $500,000 and $1.5 million, and none of it lasts forever under daily use. Payroll is the other relentless number. A superintendent, the agronomist who manages turf health, commands a salary of $65,000 to $120,000 a year, and a full grounds crew capable of maintaining the course to a playable standard needs 8 to 15 additional staff, pushing total grounds payroll past $500,000 annually on a well-run facility. Add clubhouse staff, pro shop staff, and food and beverage service, and total annual operating costs for a mid-tier 18-hole course typically land somewhere between $1 and $2 million, and that number arrives every single year whether it rains or not. Now we get to the part of this business that actually explains everything else. The round of golf. Picture two golfers. One plays 45 rounds a year, walks every hole, and rents a cart every time. The other joins as a member, pays initiation and monthly dues, and plays 6 rounds a year total. Which of those two is more valuable to the club? It's the second one, and this is the single most important idea in the entire golf business. A round of golf sold at retail is a low-margin transaction. Public course charging $50 a round has to cover cart maintenance, ball washer refills, scorecard printing, starter staff, and a proportional share of the mowing that happened that morning, whether 10 people or 200 played. Industry estimates put the direct cost of servicing a single round cart staff time where somewhere around $15 to $25, which sounds like a healthy margin until you remember that fixed costs, the mowing, the irrigation, the superintendent's salary, get paid regardless of how many rounds happen that day. A course needs a certain volume of rounds just to cover the daily nut, and most public courses in America run at somewhere between 40 and 60% of their theoretical maximum capacity across the year, once you account for weather days, off-season slowdowns, and weekday mornings when the parking lot sits nearly empty. This is why the private club model flips the entire equation, and it's the part nobody outside the industry understands. Private country club doesn't really want you playing constantly. It wants your initiation fee and your monthly dues arriving like clockwork, whether you play once a year or 50 times. Initiation fees at private clubs commonly range from $10,000 at a modest suburban club to well over $200,000 at a marquee private course, and monthly dues typically run between $300 and $1,500 regardless of usage. A club with 400 members paying an average of $600 a month in dues generates nearly $3 million a year before a single green fee changes hands, and that revenue arrives whether the membership plays golf twice a week or never leaves the dining room. Just like the gym member who pays and never shows up, the golf member who pays dues and rarely tees off costs the club almost nothing in cart wear or staff time, while their check clears every single month. This is not an accident. It is the business model. There's a psychology underneath this that's worth slowing down for, because it's the same psychology that keeps a member paying dues for a course they visit twice a year. Part of it is identity. A country club membership is rarely purchased for the golf alone. It's purchased as a signal to business, contacts, to neighbors, to yourself, that you belong to a certain tier of community. The golf is almost incidental to that signal. Part of it is sunk cost dressed up as commitment. An initiation fee of $50 or $100,000 creates a psychological anchor that makes canceling feel like admitting the money was wasted, even when the ongoing monthly dues are a separate and much smaller decision that could be walked away from at any time. And part of it is simple inertia, the same inertia that keeps a gym membership alive long after the treadmill stops getting used. Clubs understand this, which is why resignation from a private club is rarely as simple as a phone call. Many bylaws require written notice months in advance. Some require the departing member to keep paying dues until a replacement member is found and approved by the board, and some initiation fees are only partially refundable and only once a new member has paid in to take the vacated spot. None of this is accidental. A club's entire financial model depends on members staying enrolled through the years when they play less, not just the years when they play more, and the exit process is built to slow that departure down exactly as much as the law and market norms allow. The real revenue mechanism goes even further than dues, and this is the reveal that explains why so many golf courses exist in the first place. Real estate. A huge share of American golf courses were never built to be profitable golf operations at all. They were built as an amenity to sell homes. A developer buys 200 acres, builds an 18-hole course on maybe half of it, and sells the surrounding lots as fairway front and green front real estate at a premium of 15 to 30% over comparable lots without a golf view. On a community of 300 home sites, that premium alone can represent tens of millions of dollars in additional developer profit, collected entirely upfront, long before the course itself turns a single year's operating profit. The golf course in this model is a marketing expense with grass on it. Food and beverage and banquet revenue is the other, often overlooked engine. Wedding and event rental at a scenic clubhouse can generate $15,000 to $50,000 per event, and a well-booked banquet calendar can contribute more net profit in a single season than an entire year of green fees, because unlike the golf floor, a banquet hall has no irrigation bill and no superintendent's salary attached to it. None of this means the model is safe, and the structural risks here are real, and the industry has the scars to prove it. Golf in the United States went through a genuine building boom through the 1990s, developers convinced that every new suburb needed a signature course to anchor it, and the industry significantly overbuilt relative to how many people actually play the game. For roughly a decade and a half, starting in the mid-2000s, more American golf courses closed every single year than opened, a slow-motion contraction that quietly eliminated somewhere in the range of 1,000 facilities from the national inventory. Individual operators felt this directly. ClubCorp, once one of the largest private club management companies in the country, operating hundreds of golf and country clubs, carried billions in debt from years of acquisitions and was eventually taken private in a leveraged buyout, a structure that loaded even more debt onto a business whose underlying membership revenue was already softening. Sports authority-style overbuilding also hit municipal golf hard. Numerous city-owned courses across the country, built during periods of civic optimism in the 20th century, have been shuttered or sold for redevelopment in the past 2 decades once the municipality could no longer justify subsidizing an operation that a shrinking pool of golfers couldn't support on green fees alone. Private equity has since moved in aggressively on the surviving assets, rolling up hundreds of independent clubs into large management platforms, betting that shared purchasing power on fertilizer and equipment, centralized marketing, and professional membership sales teams can rescue margins an individual club owner could never achieve alone. That bet has worked often enough to keep capital flowing into the sector, but it has also meant that many once independently owned clubs now answer to a private equity portfolio manager, rather than a local board, with all the cost-cutting pressure that implies. Water has become an existential risk of its own in parts of the country. Municipalities across the American Southwest have imposed mandatory turf reduction and irrigation restriction orders on golf facilities during drought. Years, in some cases forcing courses to convert significant acreage to desert. Landscaping or face punitive tiered water rates that can multiply a course's single largest recurring bill overnight. A course that cannot keep its fairways green loses both its golfers and the real estate premium the surrounding homes were built on, which means a drought doesn't just raise costs, it can quietly erase the entire reason the community around it was built in the first place. There's also a seasonal rhythm to this business that shapes the entire financial calendar, and it catches new owners off guard almost as often as the irrigation bill does. In most of the country, golf is a seasonal product, even where the course stays open year-round. A course in the northern half of the United States might generate 70% or more of its annual rounds and revenue in a 6-month window between late spring and early fall, while November through March delivers a trickle of play interrupted by weather closures, frozen greens, and daylight hours too short for a full team. Payroll for the grounds crew, however, does not shrink to match. Turf still needs winterization, irrigation systems still need to be blown out and protected from freeze damage, and a skeleton ground staff still has to be retained through the off-season simply to keep the course from deteriorating before spring. Even in warm weather markets where play continues year-round, there's a second seasonal wrinkle. Peak season in places like Florida and Arizona runs opposite to the snowbird calendar, meaning the course is overwhelmed with seasonal residents and vacationing golfers for 4 or 5 months, then drops sharply once that population heads home for the summer, leaving a long stretch where fixed costs continue against a much thinner trickle of rounds. Rain and extreme heat compound this further. A single significant storm can wipe out an entire weekend's tee sheet, the 2 days that typically generate a disproportionate share of a public course's weekly revenue, with no way to recover those lost tee times later in the week. Experienced operators build cash reserves during the peak months specifically to survive these gaps, treating the strong season the way a seasonal retailer treats its holiday quarter, as the window that has to fund the quiet months, rather than a permanent baseline of revenue. So how does a golf course actually make money in plain mechanical terms? The core engine is dues and initiation revenue plus real estate premium, minus fixed maintenance and payroll costs, with green fee and food and beverage revenue layered on top as contribution margin rather than the primary engine. Let's actually walk through the math side by side for both models, because the contrast is the whole story. Take a mid-tier private club with 400 members. Average monthly dues of $600 generate $2,880,000 a year before a single green fee is collected. Add a modest food and beverage and banquet program, contributing another $300,000 in net profit, and total revenue before green fee sits at roughly $3,180,000 against fixed annual operating costs of $1.5 million for maintenance, payroll, and utilities. That club is already profitable before a single member tees off, with green fees and cart rentals from guests and outside play adding pure incremental margin on top. Now take a public daily fee course with the same $1.5 million fixed cost base and no membership dues to lean on. At an average realized rate of $45 a round, after direct cart and staff costs of roughly $20 a round, that course nets about $25 of contribution per round. To cover $1.5 million in fixed costs, it needs 60,000 rounds a year just to break even, which, on a course open roughly 300 days a year, works out to 200 rounds a day, every day, rain or shine. That number is close to the physical ceiling for a single 18-hole layout, which is exactly why so many public courses run on razor-thin margins even when the parking lot looks full, while a private club with a stable dues base clears its entire fixed cost structure before the pro shop even opens for the day. Let's put this together across a full year. In the optimistic scenario, you've built a semi-private club in a growing suburban market, kept membership near capacity, and layered in a strong banquet and wedding calendar. Under those conditions, a mid-tier 18-hole facility can generate somewhere between $2 and $4 million a year in total revenue, with a net operating margin of 10 to 20% once real estate premiums are excluded, translating to an owner's take somewhere between $200,000 and $600,000 a year. Genuinely solid outcome. In the realistic scenario, a drought forces irrigation cutbacks that thin out the fairways right as membership renewal season arrives. A new public course opens 20 minutes away and pulls price-sensitive golfers away with cheaper green fees, and an aging irrigation system needs an unplanned six-figure repair. Under those conditions, that same club can slide from a comfortable double-digit margin into a single-digit margin or an outright loss for the year, while the golf itself still looks, from the clubhouse veranda, exactly as busy as it did the year before. So if you do decide to buy or build a golf course, remember the one thing that actually determines whether you succeed. It was never really about how many rounds you can sell. It's about how well you can survive on the members who pay every month and rarely swing a club, and on the real estate that sits quietly appreciating around every fairway you maintain.